Hi, welcome. If you were born in the 70s and 80s, these next 20 things should bring back some memories. The annoyance of the constantly unraveled or unrewound cassette tape, and our sheer genius in figuring out that a simple pencil was the answer to both. I spent a lot of my youth turning that pencil over and over again. I'm sure many of you can relate. How about how special and important you felt if you actually owned a shiny new boombox to put your cassette tapes in? It was a must-have if you were cool and an absolute necessity in order to record your fave songs off the radio for your mixtapes. I spent hours waiting for good songs to come on the radio so I could record them. How great was it when we were finally able to take those mixtapes and listen to them on the go? The Walkman was an absolute dream until the mid-80s when new technology switched out the cassette tape for discs, and any little bump or jostle would cause the music to skip over and over again until eventually the discs didn't work properly anymore. So frustrating. All of you night owls should remember the boredom that occurred after midnight if you were trying to watch TV, because all of a sudden the national anthem would come on, followed by Test Pattern, and then nothing but snow, because there was no TV programming after midnight. As the years went on, they eventually introduced late night infomercials, but they were about as entertaining as the Test Pattern. During the day when there actually was something to watch on TV, if you wanted to actually know what was on, you had to rely on a little magazine called the TV Guide. It listed everything that was on and when, and you did not want to get caught without that guide. Otherwise, you were sitting in front of the TV, switching the dial from channel to channel, looking for something interesting to watch after every single show. I got caught doing that a time or two when I was younger, and I'm telling you, I probably wasted more time switching that dial from channel to channel than I did actually watching TV shows. Whether you were a kid in the 80s or today, kids will be kids, and most kids spend hours on the phone. The only difference is, back then, we couldn't walk around and talk on the phone because we were tethered to the wall by a phone cord. So we would spend hours talking on the phone and keeping busy by twirling the phone cord around our fingers and ourselves. By the time we hung up, it would probably take 5 or 10 minutes to unwind ourselves and free ourselves from the phone cord. And speaking of phones, if you were one of the cool kids, you owned the see-through phone. Do you remember that phone? I felt so blessed and lucky that I actually owned one. And thinking back, it was so hideous looking. You could see all of the internal workings. It was very unattractive, but it was a must-have. If you were one of the cool kids, you also spent a good chunk of your childhood hanging out at the roller rink. Oh yeah, that was the place to hang. And you were the cream of the crop if you owned your own skates and didn't have to rent them. I was so proud of my roller skates. I loved them. I even had the fluffy pom-poms. Another popular source of entertainment back then was heading to the video store to rent a movie. Oh, and how satisfying and exciting was it when you rushed into the video store and made a beeline for the new releases and you managed to get your hands on a copy of that one particular movie that you've been waiting to watch, and you actually got one before they were rented out? Oh yeah, that's how you knew that it was going to be a good weekend. Let's talk fashion now, shall we? This next fashion choice brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it. What am I talking about? Jelly shoes. Oh yes, they were all the rage. We all had to have them, and for the life of me, I cannot figure out why. They were not attractive looking shoes, and let me tell you, if you wore those things for more than a half an hour, boy, did your feet pay. I spent so much time covered in blisters because of those stupid jelly shoes, but I wore them anyways, and I endured because all the cool girls were wearing them. Just as strange as the jelly shoes was the neon phase. Do you remember that? Bright neon clothing was the must-have. So of course, I jumped right on that trend as well. I went out and I bought myself a bright neon yellow sweater. And boy, I was so proud of that sweater. And thinking back, it was such an eyesore. But I loved it, and I probably paired it with some leisure pants or some tights and some Peter Pan boots. Now let's talk about the leg warmers that were also all the rage back then, and so of course I had to own, but were never actually used to warm the legs. They were just simply a cool fashion accessory that all the girls wore to fit in. Sort of bizarre looking back. Strange what catches on, isn't it? We have to include some of the must-have toys from back then as well. Every kid I knew back then had 1, a Snoopy snow cone machine, and 2, an Easy Bake Oven. They were so much fun. We loved making tasty treats all by ourselves, but I will tell you one thing, safety was not an issue back then. That Snoopy snow cone machine was sharp, and the Easy Bake Oven, whoo, that thing got hot. I don't know how many times I burned myself on that thing trying to make little cakes for myself. But we played with those 2 toys over and over and over and over again. They were awesome. Safety also didn't seem to be a big issue back then when it came to riding in the car. I can remember my sister and I would kneel on the back seat and look out the back window, and we would wave over and over to all the cars driving behind us. Or we would lean in through the divider between the 2 front seats and talk to our parents. Our car came with seat belts, as most of them did back then, but those seat belts were brutal. I don't know if you guys remember this, but those metal seat belts would heat up like pokers during the summer, and they would practically brand you if you even attempted to touch them, let alone try to put them on. I also remember as a child not having to own a watch. We told the time using the street lights. I'm sure many of you can relate to this as well. When those street lights started to come on, you ran for home, and you ran fast because you knew if you weren't in that front door by the time all those street lights came on, you were in trouble. Now let's talk fabulous inventions in the 80s. How many of you were so completely excited to be able to turn your lights on and off just by clapping? Who would have thought that you could control your lights without even touching them? Clap on, clap off, the clapper. And how happy were you to finally have a quick and healthy option for popping popcorn that didn't involve your stove, a giant pot, oil, or Jiffy Pop? Yes, the air popper. We all had to have one, although I will tell you that only about 2/3 of the popcorn actually made it into the bowl. The other third flew all over the kitchen unless we put a tea towel over the air popper. How awesome was it to not have to use your stove for reheating anymore either, because now we had microwaves. You could instantly reheat things that would take forever to do on the stove. Awesome. I believe this next one only applies to Canadian kids, but it was a huge part of my childhood. The Sears Christmas Wish Book. Oh man, I was so excited every year when that catalog came out. I would sit there for hours and flip from page to page to make the perfect wish list for Santa. I have fond memories of that catalog. Speaking of giant books, if you wanted to contact anyone by phone back then and you couldn't remember the number, you had to rely on a giant phone book to look it up. And quite surprisingly, you can still find phone books today. That shocked me. Although I don't think many people really use them anymore because cell phones pretty much store all of that information. There are so many classics from my generation that other generations just would not appreciate. I could go on all day. I had a great childhood, and I love being able to look back and remember. I hope you enjoyed taking this trip down memory lane with me and that you could relate to at least some of it. If you enjoy content for middle-aged women, you may want to check out my channel. I make videos on all things midlife. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.